Hey, good evening, everyone. Let me know if you can hear and see me.
I can
Both.
hear and
Hear
see you.
see.
Oh yeah, we got it going good then. Well, good. We still have a few more people showing up, so I am going to, there's my old buddy Travis. We still have a few people joining in, so give me just a second while I let everybody in the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, it looks like it's 6:30 now. I'll go ahead and get started. And if anybody else shows up, I can go ahead and admit. Welcome, everybody. Let me go ahead and make sure all the buttons are set correctly and everything else is going good. We'll go ahead and get started. We had a lot of people sign up for this webinar. As usual, we have a few people show up in person, but I'm finding a lot of people will view these afterwards. So that's a good thing. And as I go through tonight, just a few notes before I get started. As I go through tonight, if you miss anything or misunderstand everything, I'm recording this, and in a day or two, you'll get, since you signed up for it, you'll get the first look at to be able to watch the replay of it. So once I get it downloaded and then upload it to my YouTube channel, I'll send it out to everyone in attendance who signed up for it first, and then you can go back and review the specific parts that we talk about. So what I'm going to talk about tonight isn't really rocket science. Let me go ahead and get the screen sharing going. Can everybody see that? A guide to image management strategies.
Yes, sir.
I'm always impressed that I know big words like that. So I'm going to look at this for just a second. Let me get everything sort of arranged like I want it, and I'll go get started. Yeah, welcome to a guide to image management strategies. You know, one of the things that I talk about a lot, I know people like Stan and Jan have heard me talk about on some of these workshops I do, is one of the key things in using something like Lightroom is everyone talks about the editing part of it, and the editing part's important, but really to me, one of the most important things are is the image management part of it. And that's the only way I know to keep up with everything I've got going on and to manage all the images I have, because believe me, I shoot a lot of pictures and have a lot of images. And so developing those workflows to be able to handle all those images coming in, and more importantly, giving those images a place to live their life and to be able to find them later on, to me, that's key. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I am coming to you live. I'm still stalling because I still have a few people that are joining in. I'm coming to you live tonight from Hackberry Farm, just north of Dodge City, Texas. And like a lot of the country, we've been cold the past couple of days. We got a really good rain yesterday, which is good for us because it's been awfully dry this summer, and the normal rains are starting to come back. So all the ponds are filling back up, and I've actually got a wetland on my place that the ducks will circle. They have no place to land, so I'm hoping that thing will get filled up with water, so all the ducks will have a place to land. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. By the way, you know, I want this to be a dialogue and not a monologue. So as I go through this, I've got a segment at the end of the presentation for any questions you might have. But as I'm going through this, if you have any questions about anything, just let me know, ask away. I see a lot of people are muted, but you can unmute yourself. I think I give you permission to do that. Everyone's able to unmute themselves and ask a question. So ask away as I go through it. I'll do my best to try to clarify it. Like I tell a lot of people, I speak a different language. It's called Texan. So if you're from Texas, you understand everything I'm saying. If you're from somewhere like British Columbia, Stan, then you may need a translator every now and then. By the way, Stan, I've been able to contact you. I just got home a day or two ago. I got that fish. I'm going to send you a picture when I get it hung on the wall. So I appreciate that. Anyway, one more thing I want to tell you. There's really two parts to this. I'm going to show you a PowerPoint presentation first, and then when I'm done, I'll actually go into Lightroom and share with you some specific techniques that I do to manage everything. So we'll watch the presentation first. If you have any questions, go through that. When I'm done, I'll switch over to Lightroom, show you how I do things from a practical standpoint, and then we'll go from there. Let me click in the right spots. There we go. Now, what's the ultimate problem for everybody? And the problem is you've got images everywhere, and I hear that from people all the time. They've got 50 different hard drives. They are having a hard time keeping up with everything. It's just that they've let, I describe digital photography a lot of times as playing slot machines with the casino's money. It's just easy to play and easy to take pictures. And before you know it, things get out of hand and you've got pictures everywhere. And I'm guessing some of y'all may have that problem or not, or if not, you wouldn't be on this webinar. And the solution is you got to develop a workflow. And that's what this whole thing is going to be about tonight, is developing that workflow for yourself. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about my workflow and how I do things. Now, let me give you a disclaimer up front when I tell you how I do things. My disclaimer up front is this is just my way of doing things. If you got on your phone tonight and you ask Google Maps or Apple Maps directions to get to Dodge City, Texas, it's likely it's going to show you three different directions on how to get here. But the key thing is all three ways will get you here. And so when I talk about my workflow, I'm not saying this is the absolute best way to do it. I'm just saying over time, this is the way I've developed for myself that works most efficiently for me. What I hope to do is lay down kind of a direction for all of you guys so that you can discover what your way is and modify maybe what I'm doing to work best for you. So we'll talk about my workflow, but my workflow is not necessarily the best. It's just my way. We'll also talk about, hang on one second. We'll also talk about specific steps that I use to manage my images, specific tools that I use to manage my images, and both of those things are equally important. And then I'm going to show you how it all works in the end. And then, so what's the key to managing your digital collection? It's really thinking about efficiency and thinking about consistency. Whenever you think about any kind of business you may be in, there's protocols that you follow each and every time. And those protocols are in place so you can be consistent each and every time. You do the same thing each and every time. You get predictable results in the end. And more than anything, it's about being efficient. I was telling this story. I did a webinar for a camera club last night, and I was telling this story. I've never been great at math. I'm more of a right brain kind of guy, or the higher level math. I'm really good at practical and I call country boy math, just practical everyday math. I'm really good at that. But when it comes to like algebra and trigonometry and those kind of things, I was never good at it. The story I told last night was when I was in college, I took college algebra 3 times. The first time I failed it. The second time I dropped it before I failed it. And then the third time I told the professor, if I can just get a D in this class, I promise you I will never come back on your side of the campus again. And I've kept that promise for 30 something years now. So I'm really proud of that commitment I made to him and haven't been back, but I finally passed it. But with that said, one of the things I always think about is math. And so when it comes to efficiency, here's why I think about it. I shoot probably about 100,000 images a year. And so each one of those 100,000 images I shoot has to be looked at in some regard on the computer. So I'm always thinking efficiently. I'm thinking about efficiency because if I shoot 100,000 images, and let's say I can figure out some way to save 4 seconds per image, that's 400,000 seconds total. I divide that by 60. I divide it. Oops, hit the wrong key. I divide that by 60. I divide it one more time by 60. That's 111 hours a year I save just by saving 4 seconds per image. So efficiency for me is key. And I'm betting it's key for a lot of you guys too, because whether you already have a workflow or not, just thinking about going through your images and developing a workflow, it seems like a mountain of a task. But, like the old saying goes, you can climb a mountain. It just takes one step at a time. The same way you can manage all your images, just takes a step at a time. And believe me, I've got a mini mountain to climb right now because I've really been neglectful the past few months of sorting my images. So I've got about 60,000 I've got to go through, and all that starts tomorrow because this is a good way to remind me to do that. And so I think all of this would be remiss if I didn't tell you what my equipment is, just so everyone has a basis of what I use. In my equipment, I use a 27-inch iMac. That's my primary piece of equipment that I look at my pictures with, that I ingest them onto this machine that I'm giving this presentation to you tonight. And the reason why I like using a 27-inch iMac, I've got a MacBook Pro computer, but I don't use that for any image management or any image editing, simply because at 53 years of age, I wear glasses. When I read stuff, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. I just like seeing the pictures big on the screen so I can tell every little thing there is about it. I also use a Drobo 5C. Now, here's the problem with Drobo 5C. It's always worked good for me, but Drobo, the company, has recently filed for bankruptcy. That doesn't mean they're going away, but because of supply chain issues and what I understand, they're having a hard time getting parts. I looked today on B&H Photo. B&H doesn't carry their products anymore, which makes me a little bit concerned. And so I'm actively looking for a new system. It's like this Drobo, it's like a RAID system where it holds 5 drives into one enclosure, and it makes the computer think it's just one big drive. And so if you've got, if anyone else has a system they recommend at the end of this presentation, I'd love to hear what it is, because I was actively today looking for a new enclosure to start building these gigantic drives that I've been using back again. But right now, though, I'm using a Drobo 5C, which works great. I've used Drobos for a long time now. I hate to see the company going through the problems that they're going through, but I also hate to see my images jeopardized over time. I use Lightroom Classic. I'm not a big fan of the Lightroom Creative Cloud. I think Lightroom Classic is a lot better program, and so that's what I use. And then I've just started using, this is a brand new in my workflow, a program called Photo Mechanic. And you may not have ever heard of Photo Mechanic before, but bear with me. I will introduce you to that here in just a little bit. And I'll tell you why I use Photo Mechanic. So my workflow, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is a 6-step process. First thing I do, of course, is download the pictures. And I include that because I'll break down each one of these in more detail as I go through the presentation. But the first step is I download. And then second step, I do a quality edit. Once I've got everything downloaded, I do a quality edit. And again, I'll go into more I'll go into more specifics about each one of these as the presentation goes along. The third step I do is I rename my images once I've done a quality edit. The fourth step is I use color labels to help start identifying them. The fifth step is I apply keywords. I'm going to show you something. If you haven't ever seen me do this before, I'm going to show you a way that I keyword that if you already keyword, you might find helpful. If you don't keyword, it's really a game changer. It's been a game changer for me in the way I kind of handle my keywords. And then the last thing I do is I do the final filing. I call it the old folks home. That's what my Drobos are for. That's where my images go to live out the rest of their life. And if I need to find them, I know where I need to go. So with that 6-step workflow, the first step is I download. Now, when I download the pictures, all my pictures get downloaded into a central folder on my desktop. And why a central folder? The reason why I like doing that is because it's pretty simple for me, because I'm thinking as efficiently as I can. And for me to think efficiently, I just have to think simplistically. And so when I plug my cards or plug my camera into my computer, I've got one folder on my desktop. I name it First Picks. For whatever reason, that's what I named it. And so all those pictures get downloaded into that folder in mass, maybe 20,000 images that goes in that folder after a particular shoot. But that's what they do, is they go into there. And the reason why I download them there is because that's where Photo Mechanic comes into play. And again, I'll show you Photo Mechanic in a minute. The first thing I'm going to do is just go through these this presentation first, then I'll show you the practical side of this webinar tonight, where I'll show you what all the software looks like. So first thing I do, download all the pictures into one folder on the computer. Step 2, I do a quality edit. And in the quality edit, I do 2 passes typically. And the first pass I do is when I delete the images based on the common quality factors we probably all use, such as, is it in focus? And is it a good enough exposure where I can reasonably save it and be able to do some post-processing and bring the exposure back where it needs to be. And so really, if it doesn't meet those 2 criteria, I just delete it. You know, I've heard people say they don't delete any of their bad images, they keep everything. I'm not a big fan of that strategy, because it takes up hard drive space. And believe me, that hard drive space will come in handy one day when you start filling up hard drives over time. And then from a practical matter, I tell everybody too, jokingly, don't love anything that won't love you back. A bad picture won't love you back. So I have no problem with deleting them. And you know, the number of pictures I delete varies on what I've been shooting pictures of. If it's something that's really fast moving, like birds in flight, I throw a lot more away. If it's landscapes, I tend to not take as many pictures of landscapes. And then as a result, I tend to not throw as many away, but do a basic edit on the quality factors like focus and exposure, tag the ones I want to delete, then get rid of them. They can get rid of them forever after that, so they're not taking up space. And then the second pass I make is where I pick the images that I'll edit, and I'll either place on my website or I'll deliver to clients or post them to Facebook or do whatever else I'm going to do. I've got a logical step-by-step basis that I'll show you of how I go through the pictures, and then they all get how I make my second picks, and then be able to identify those later. So essentially, my whole strategy is when you use the concept of finding a needle in a haystack, how do I go back and find one image of 750,000 images I have in my file? It's like finding a needle in a haystack. But when I do these things where I make my picks and I label my picks, all we're doing is we're still finding a needle in a haystack. We're just making the haystacks a whole lot smaller each time. And I'll show you how to do that. And so the third step I do is I rename all of my images. Now, this is a step that you could easily skip. I do it for one particular reason. And the reason is, and this is how I name all my images right here. I'll put my last name dash and then whatever that number is. The number is arbitrary. I've seen people use strategies where they'll develop some kind of numbering system where they can look at the number and without seeing the picture, know what's in the picture. I don't go to that level of detail. Mainly the reason why I rename it is this. I shoot a lot of pictures for magazines and she used to shoot more commercial client work. And because of that, I never wanted there to be any doubt about who the image belonged to. Now, I know they could look in the metadata and be able to see that, but that's assuming everyone knows how to look at the metadata in an image. And I never made that assumption. So I wanted them, whoever them is, I wanted the person looking at my image to be able to look at the file name and be able to track down who that image belongs to. I remember in the early days of digital, people would use this is how I learned this. People would leave their native file names on their image files. And, you know, you may get an email from a photo editor for a magazine going out to 100 people saying, hey, whose picture is this? I have no clue who it belongs to. And so when I saw enough of those, that's why I started renaming my image each and every time. So I think that whole industry has matured to the standpoint where people could figure out whose image it belongs to. But since I've been doing that so long, it's still a standard practice I do where I go rename all of my images. And I think there's another reason that you should think about renaming your images. I discovered this when I was I went to Botswana last summer and shot like almost 40,000 images on that trip. And I noticed my camera, because I never changed the way my camera numbers images, every 10,000 images, it would reset. And so if depending on your filing strategy, you may could end up with more than one image that has the same image number, even though they may not be related to, the two images may not be even remotely related as far as subject matter. You could end up with the same images, multiple images with the same number. So rename is probably not a bad idea. Just whatever naming convention you come up with is really up to you. And then step 4 is I use color labels. And then using Lightroom, I use color labels instead of stars. I know a lot of people will use the 1 through 5 stars. And the reason I don't is pretty simple. When you're looking at the thumbnail view in Lightroom, I can just identify the colors quicker than I can looking at the stars if I'm just trying to go through a lot of images really quick. Now, I know you can go through, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, where you can go through and segregate them by color, segregate them by stars. But early on, I just got used to using colors rather than stars. And so that's why I do that. In addition, the color label I give the images helps me understand at a quick glance where I'm at in the process with that image. So to back up, when I go through my second edit and I'm picking out the pictures that I want to put on my website or send to a client or put on Facebook or whatever, I'll give them a label. And so the first label I'll give them is red. And then that just tells me when I look at red that I know those pictures are my picks. So I can move all my other images that don't get that red label and put them in the final place where I'm going to file them. And then as I go through the process, let's say I work on them a little bit and I'm done, I may give them a yellow label just to tell myself I've done all the color correction and any kind of editing I'm going to do. And then after that, I may keyword them, or I may be somewhere in the process of keywording them, and I may step up that color to green. And so when I'm done with them completely, but they haven't gone on my website yet, then those are the blue labeled images. When I have no more work to do, they're just waiting to go on my website or waiting to be shipped out the door, I'll label them blue. And then and then on Lightroom, it makes it easy. 6, 7, 8, 9. 6 is red, 7 is yellow, 8 is green, 9 is blue. And then when they finally get to where they're going to go, they reach their final destination on my website, then you've got to go into the menus and I can make one last color change and I make that final color purple. So if I go through my entire catalog of images and I find the purple images, I know those are duplicated on my website or they went out to a client. Those are my final picks. I've done all the things I'm going to do to those pictures. They're ready for prime time. And then step 5, I keyword, and this is the process I think can be daunting to many, but it really doesn't need to be that daunting at all. And keyword is just that. I mean, when you go online and search Google, you're essentially putting keywords into Google to help it index to help it search its index sites on the web and help you find whatever website you're looking for. Keywording images does no different. You're telling Lightroom what is in that image. So that way, one day later, when you want to go back and find all the images of a great horned owl, you just type in those keywords and you're able to find it. And so I don't put real descriptive labels. I mean, I don't put real descriptive phrases on my images. I just use pretty simple keywords. And so, for example, the way I would keyword this image here would be owl, great horned owl, bird, wildlife, and I may think of 2 or 3 others that I'll put in there. And I learned that a long time ago when I first came out with a website that had a searchable database, maybe 20 years ago, when I first did that, or going on 20 years ago, I started trying to study how people search for images. And most of the time, people don't search for images like where they say like great horned owl sitting on a limb, puffed out. They'll do pretty simple searches like just great horned owl, or or a bird, an owl, whatever. They just use pretty simple terms. So that's what guided me into doing the keywords the way I do them today. I keep them pretty simple. I don't have to think much about them. And over time, your database in Lightroom begins to build, where it builds you a catalog of your own keywords, and it makes it easy to go back and keyword them later. And again, I'll show you that here in a minute. And then the 6th step I do is the final filing. And that's where I put my images to bed. I mentioned earlier, I call it the old folks home. That's where they go live in the old folks home out the rest of their life. Hopefully their life lasts forever on the digital media that I choose to store them on. But the final filing is how I end up storing them long-term and be able to go back and archive them and find them later. And the way I do that is pretty simple. I use a subject-based filing system. And again, all these things I'm going to show you here in a minute. I use a subject-based filing system. And then, for example, like on that owl, I may have one folder called bird, and then a subfolder within the bird folder I call owl, and then another subfolder called great horned owl. And that's one of my initial ways I started filing all my stuff, because this is more of a business standpoint for me, because I do so much stock photography licensing for a variety of clients. Dates really don't matter to me at all. For example, this picture you're looking at on the screen, I can't even remember the exact date I took it. I mean, and I can tell you 0% of the people will say, show me a picture that I deal with, will say, show me a picture that was taken on October the 4th, 2020, or whenever this picture was taken. It was somewhere in there, maybe 2021. No one will ever say that. What they say is, I want to see a picture of an elk that's a silhouette. And so that's how I build my system. So I may have mammals, deer, and under the category of deer, I may have elk, and then this thing will get stored in there. And so using a system of keywords, the metadata enclosed in the photos that's given to you for free, and then color labels, I can hone on this image and be able to find it pretty quick. Does anybody have any questions so far? If so, you can unmute yourself and ask that question. I think I've got it. Yeah, you can unmute yourself. I've got it set where everyone can unmute themselves. I think I've got everyone muted right now. If not, I don't think we have any questions so far. Okay, here we go. Let's look at a demonstration. So give me a second. This will be. Oh, I've got some questions here that are showed up on the chat. So let me go through these real quick before I show you a demonstration. Roberta asked, oh, hope you're doing well, Roberta. How do you rename your images? I'll show you how to do that when I jump over to the Lightroom part, Roberta. And then Maddie says, when you go to put it in a file, it should give you an option to rename. And then you can also rename them on import, I believe. And then Lightroom Classic also has an option for batch renaming. That's correct, Martin. That's what I usually do is batch renaming. And then Synology Disk Station. I appreciate that. So I'm going to put that aside. So let me show you. Let me share a different screen. So a new screen should have showed up for you there. Let me know if you see. This is Photo Mechanic we're looking at here. And I've recently made this switch. Lightroom is great, but for my first pass, I've been using Photo Mechanic for a reason. And I don't know if y'all have ever noticed this or not, but Lightroom, if you click on an image, by the way, you are getting to see all my images that I did on this shoot, both good and bad. So people always ask me all the time, how do you take such good pictures all the time? And I tell them you never get to see the bad ones. So you are getting to see the bad ones tonight too. The reason why I like using Photo Shelter on my first pass on the edit is because Lightroom, and I've got a computer that's juiced up pretty well, but Lightroom, once you start going through pictures fairly quick, Lightroom can't keep up and it won't render them completely. And so it's slow when it's showing a thumbnail view. But Photo Mechanic, no matter how fast that I go, see, that's like an out of focus image there. No matter how fast I go, I can't outrun Photo Mechanic. And so it's always showing me a full res rendered image. By the way, I was shooting these out of a moving bus into Denali National Park. So anyway, I can go through these images really quick and be able to identify which ones are bad and which ones are good. And really all I do is use the next arrow, the right arrow, and then number one. I'll just give it a number one, which will give it 1 star. So when I'm going through all these pictures, I can go back and I can sort and just show me all the 1-star images, and I can delete all of them. So that's really using Photo Mechanic as this first pass instead of using Lightroom has really saved me a lot of time. I was able to go through all those Africa images. I started going through them on Lightroom, but again, Lightroom gets kind of slow where you're waiting, 8 or 10 seconds, or I'm waiting 8 or 10 seconds on an image to render just so I can see it and tell if it's good or bad. And, again, all those images that you're looking at, it may not sound like a lot at first if you're just saving 6 or 7 seconds per image, but once all that adds up over time, it's quite a bit of time. And I get pretty frustrated. I was getting pretty frustrated with Lightroom of having to just sit still, and it was taking me so long to go through my pictures. That's one of the reasons I got behind, because going on these workshops, I'll shoot pictures too, and I'm shooting all these pictures and I'm getting back and I'm thinking to myself, I don't even want to mess with it. I don't even want to go through them. And just a couple of months ago, I was thinking about Photo Mechanic, and I knew I'd bought it a long time ago, and I read a couple of things about it that like Olympic sports shooters use it, and that's why they use it is for their first pass, just to be able to go through the images and be able to tell which ones are good and which ones are bad. I mean, I can, like everybody else that's in attendance tonight, I've gotten pretty good at looking at my images pretty quick and making a snap judgment. Like this picture here of the Northern Lights, I just screwed up and didn't have the focus right. And so I can just go through as quick as you're seeing them change and be able to adjust it and get and be able to select the ones that are good as opposed to the ones that are bad. By the way, I'm just looking at these pictures and realizing how cool the Aurora Borealis is. If you've never seen that before, I recommend you put that on your bucket list because it's a pretty special thing to see. And so first step, step one, like I talked about, I download. And then the second step is the quality edit. And this is the first step of my quality edit. Now, when I'm through with Photo Mechanic and I'm through going through my quality edit, then that's when I open up in the Lightroom. So let me go back. Okay. You ought to be able to see Lightroom now. That's when I go back and I do my, I'll just select a folder. I'm not going to do this now because it'll take a little bit, but I've already done it here. When in the first pics, let me turn something on right quick so you can see this better. Got to do it the old-fashioned way. There it is, Pro Mouse. There we go. You should be able to see the circle around my mouse now so you can follow my mouse. But anyway, when you download it in this first pics in the Lightroom, it does add an extra step to your workflow because instead of loading it directly in the Lightroom, once I download it in this first pics, I'll have to go back at some point and then I have to right click that and either tell it to synchronize folder or import files into that folder. And at that point, I'm not adding pictures to the folder, I'm just adding them to the catalog, and there's a separate workflow for that. And if you know how to do that, I'm not going to go into deep detail on how to do that. If you know how to do that, that's great. If you don't know how to do that, I can show you that later. These are all from Alaska here. And then I haven't done the quality, I haven't finished my quality edit on these, but I will go to some that, well, just in a nutshell, what I do on my quality edit is I'll go through these and you can see I've got a lot of duplicates, and the duplicates really don't bother me that bad. I like to keep duplicates just for insurance in case one file gets corrupted. Even though I make multiple backups, I've still got those files elsewhere. But as you can see, as I go through this, I'll just find the ones I think I want to keep, and I can go through a lot quicker because I know the quality edit's already been made, and then I can label them to red. And you can see there as I go through it, I can see that red label really easy as I just scroll through the images like this. And the reason why I don't like using stars, you can, because as I look through it quickly, even though you know which one I just labeled, I can't spot the 5 stars as quick as I can the color label. So the star labels will do the same thing as the color labels will. I just like the color labels better because I can just spot it quicker. Oh, I almost forgot something too. So when you get ready to rename, someone asked this question earlier. If I was going to rename these images right here, usually I'll select the whole folder to do it. But in Lightroom, you go to Library, and then you click here, or the shortcut is F2, you rename photos, and you can see there I've got my name, and then there's the sequential numbers that's going to start on next whenever I hit, and if I hit OK, and I'll go ahead and do these. I don't know what says that. Maybe I've got something. Oh, I moved them a minute ago. Anyway, whenever I rename, it'll rename those files you select in batch. It just takes a couple of seconds. It's not very hard to do it all. And so after I've downloaded them, I've done my quality edit, I've selected the pictures that I'm going to choose to keep. I rename all of them because I don't rename just my selects. I rename all of them. And then after that, let me go to another folder here. There we go. There's all the ones we were looking at earlier on the Aurora Borealis. And after after I rename them and I have my colors selected, let me just go through here and select a few colors. Then what I can do, I'm just going to batch just for illustrative purposes. I'm going to change those to 6. Then what you can do is start using the database properties of Lightroom. Then I can tell it to, using this attributes tab up here, I can say, show me all the images that are labeled red. And it'll just show me those images labeled red. Then I'm able to go through image by image and start the process of doing the hitting my develop module and start the process of being able to edit each one of those pictures. Uh-oh. Don't know why I did that. Computer's probably thinking way too hard. But we'll give that a second and see if it recovers from whatever it's doing right now. Hang on one second. Close that. I may have to restart this. And that's the great thing about technology. When it works good, it works good. And when it doesn't, you have situations like this. Let me switch back over to my Keynote. Let me make sure I'm going through the right ones. Okay, so I've renamed all my images. Showed you how to do the color label and why I use the color labels instead of stars. There we go. It just came back. And so step 5 is our keyword. So let me switch back over to this. Okay. Here we go. Now, whenever I do my edits, and as I go back through it, again, I use either the shortcut 6 to turn it red, or 7, 8, or 9. As I go through this, when I finish my edits, one thing I'll do is just go ahead and press the number 7. And what that does is apply a blue label. Now you notice in the bottom down here that there were 6 images. Now there's only 5 because it's only showing me the red images. And so as I go through this and I hit 7 each time, you can see now there's 4. So assume I've already edited these and I'm going through, and as soon as I'm done with the edit, I'm just changing the color label on them. So I've worked through all of my images I'm going to edit, and it's not all of them. It's just the ones I decide I want to keep. So then I can say, show me all the yellow images, and there's the ones I just theoretically edited before. Now, when we get to the keyword part, this is where Lightroom really starts to shine. So, and this is the part that I think is it was a game changer for me, and will be a game changer for the ones that haven't started keywording yet. Now, in the old days, let me readjust all my windows so I can fit all this in here good. In the old days, what I would do is I would take all these images and I would select them as a batch, all the like images like this. All these are Northern Lights or Aurora Borealis. And over here, we're in the library module, and over here in the keyword tags, I would do Aurora. Oops. Aurora, and then click it, and then put a comma between it, and Borealis. And I would type out every one, and then if you have multiple images selected, you can apply those to those images. But that was time consuming, and I found myself sitting there trying to think about what other keywords can I put on this images besides just the ones I think about. Because again, for me, I'm trying to figure out a way that I can key these images where other people can find them, but more importantly, how I can find them, because the way I describe them today, maybe I get more educated on a subject later on, and I'm in my way of thinking about keywords becomes more complex. It's a way not only can I think about it today, but also think about it tomorrow. And here's what I found. If you ever use plugins if you've never used plugins on Lightroom before, I really highly suggest you get this one. And it's called My Keyworder for Lightroom. You can see it grayed out there. But if I've got a selection of images selected there, I can tag images as a batch. I can select that, and then it's going to bring up this little dialog for me. And then it's also going to ask me for money. And this is free. The reason why it's asking me for money, it asks for a donation. And typically about once a quarter, I'll donate money to the guy because this has saved me an immense amount of time. I mean, I'm talking, we keep saying things like 4 and 5 seconds per images. Now I'm saving 30 seconds per image from having to do this, which again, doesn't sound like much, but over time is tremendous. So I'm going to go back and do this again. So I've selected all the images I want to keyword. Typically I'll batch the images together and select like images so I can keyword as many as I can at one time. And then I'm going to go to file and the plugin extras and then my keyword and tag images as a batch. See, it's asking me for money again. I guess it's time for me to donate. So here I'm going to type in Aurora Borealis. And then I'm going to search keywords. And this is where it comes in handy. And you can see there, it populates this right here with a bunch of different keywords from which to choose. And this is where it's a time saver because they have a database. This plugin has a database already of all the possible keywords you can think of that would apply to these Aurora Borealis images. So then it's a matter of me just going down through here and clicking all the different keywords that I think apply to these particular images. So this was in Alaska, so Norway and Scandinavia don't count. So I'm just, and there's stars in the picture, so I'm clicking that, lights. I'm just picking all the keywords that apply to this one image. And now instead of me sitting there having to think about all the different keywords that I could apply to this image, they're given to me right here. I've just got to go through and select which ones they are. And then once I have them selected, you can see it in blue. Then I hit the right arrow and it moves them all over to the right side, which are my selected keywords. And then now, once I've got them all selected, I can hit this button in the bottom here, save keywords to photos. And then you can see it up here now, it's writing those keywords. And then when it's done, it'll close itself. And then look what popped up there, all those keywords. And really this for me is the game changer. Finding this plugin went from it taking me, I don't know how long, but too long to keyword images to now I can plow through thousands of images a day and keyword them all just by using that and the time saving it does me. Now, if you've got a big batch of images, and I don't keyword all my images, I just keyword my selects because when I'm looking for them, there's no point in me seeing all of my images. I only keyword the select ones because those are the ones I deem worthy of kind of taking to the next level. And it also saves space later on because again, the concept is we're still looking for a needle in a haystack, but we're just trying to make the haystacks a whole lot smaller. And by only keywording your select images, that's how you make it a whole lot smaller. Now, I guess I could keyword all of them, but I just don't. Now, what I was going to say earlier is where it gets a little complicated, but you can go back and modify them any way you want to. Where it gets a little complicated is if you have a similar subject in a bunch of images, but you need to put differentiating keywords in some of the images. For example, like if there's some water in these two bottom ones, I can do just the global keywords of Aurora Borealis. And then I can go back and select these two, and either I can amend it over here in this panel and add the extra keywords to it, or I can go back into my Keyworder Plus and add the extra keywords to these. And so if I go back into my Keyworder Plus, I'm just going to ask me for money again. So then I've already got the keywords already in it, as you can see there. And then I may just, for example, put, even though there's no mountains in it. Oops. I'm going to hit the wrong one. Search keywords. I do that a lot too. You got to click search keywords. Always try to hit enter. And so there it brings me up additional keywords. So then I can select, the ones I like best, add those, and then save keywords to photos. And it'll just save those additional keywords to just the photos I selected. But even that, it still saves me a lot of time. So if you pay attention to this and just do a quick view, You can kind of see how many keywords are there. Then when I click the next one, I added the keywords to, you can see there's more keywords in the next one. And so that part right there, if I can emphasize any of this presentation, if you're serious about trying to develop a workflow and find your images, I strongly suggest that you find that or some other way of being able to keyword your images. But this one for me, I have no affiliation with that company at all, other than I just found a good product and it works really good for me. And so I recommend using it any chance that you can, because it just saves a ton of time. It saves me having to sit there and think about what's in the image. I use their database, select their keywords, apply it to it. The only thing that would be better, and I bet this is coming at some point because it's already in your smartphone, is over time, and there's some services that attempt it, but they're not great at it. But over time, I think AI will develop where it'll start to be able to recognize what's in your pictures and be able to apply automatic keywords. But it works pretty good in your phones, but the technology I've seen they use as a third-party plugin for Lightroom, it doesn't work that great yet. Now, I haven't tried it in a few months, and it may have gotten better since then, but the last time I tried it, it just wasn't great at identifying what's in the pictures. And, you know, it'll never be perfect at it, just like your phone. You can go in and search by subject, and your phone does a pretty good job of knowing what's in it, but it's not infallible. So this, if you go in and manually keyword, it'll make it infallible and really make your images future-proof over time. Now, the last step I take is once I have keyworded everything and I've labeled it, let's say I've moved it all the way through my system and I've published my images to my website, or I've done whatever else I need to do. The last thing I'll do is add a color label, and this is the one I was telling you about. There's no shortcut for purple, so I changed them all to purple at that point. So when I look at my purple images in Lightroom, in my catalog, I know those have been put on my website or delivered to a client or both. And those are my select images, what I think are the best of the best. Those are the ones I end up filing. So the last step in my workflow, I will put them to bed and give them a place to live. And when I mentioned earlier, I use a filing based system. I use a subject-based filing system. And I'll show you why I don't use dates here in a minute. Again, I'll remind you of that. But if you look in this, oops, let me go back. Here we go. Hang on. If you look at this magnified view right here, you'll see that I've got all these different subject folders: agriculture, amphibians, background textures, birds, book images. Excuse me, my nose is itching. Camera traps, camping. I've got all these kind of main subjects, you know, for my images. And then I get down here to mammals. And let me scroll up a little bit. And you can see here within my mammals folder, I have all these species: American red squirrel, aoudad, armadillo, badger, all these different species I have. And the cool thing about it is Lightroom tells you how many different photos are in each one of these folders. So again, the whole concept of I'm still looking for a needle in a haystack, I'm making my haystack a lot smaller though. So by doing that, that just helps me keep up. And again, this is one of those things that's my way, not necessarily the best way. It just helps me find images a lot better. This scenario comes up all the time. I did it just the other night. I may be on the road and I'll call my wife and I'll ask her to find some images for me that someone's looking for. And my wife helps me some, but she doesn't know the intricacies of the way I file things. And not to pick on her at all, and she's probably going to hear me say this, but she probably didn't know the difference between a bighorn sheep and a Rocky Mountain goat. She wouldn't know the difference. But by putting them in these folders, I can tell her that, like, look, I'm looking for a picture of a grizzly bear. And so go to the grizzly bear folder. And this is what I do a lot of times. I'll have her click on that. And you can see there's 24,000 images in this grizzly bear folder. And then I can tell her by using the tools built into Lightroom is I'll click on attribute. It's moving kind of slow for me, but I'll tell her find all my images that are labeled purple. And so now out of 25,000 images, I'm only looking at the best 284 that I have in there right now. So again, we don't have to look at all 25,000. I'm just looking at the best 284. And then if I wanted to, I could have her use this text and then show me the images with tracks, even though they're right there in front of me. Let me see if I've got them labeled this way. I may not have them labeled. Yeah, there we go. Now it's just showing me all the images that are labeled that have tracks in them. And so there, I go with a couple of just easy keystrokes. I can go from having to look through, first of all, well, right now it's showing up in my catalog because I haven't put a lot of images in there. There's about 600,000 images, but I got about 150,000 more that's going to go on there. So now instead of wading through a 600,000 image haystack, I've got them sorted by subject. And so now I can click on that subject instead of going through 24,000 images. I can use the keys given to me by Lightroom, the tools given to me by Lightroom, to first sort by color, and then I can refine it and say, just show me the pictures that have bear tracks in it. And then now, instead of having to look through 600,000 or 24,000, it's showing me the 10 pictures that are labeled. And so then it makes it easy. Then I can tell her, okay, I'm looking for this particular picture in here, so give me that one. And then she can output it or put it in a Google Drive for a client or do whatever that she needs to do with it. Now, I can even go further than that. And this is one of the things that Lightroom is really good at. I can say, show me all the images that are of grizzly bears, all my select ones, but I only want to see the pictures that I took in. This is why I don't sort by date, because as it reads this metadata, you can see there, it's got all the dates of when these select pictures were taken. So then I can say, okay, well then show me only the pictures I took in 2021. And then there we go. There's all the selects I took in 2021. Or I can say, show me all the pictures I took in 2021 with a Canon 90D camera. And then I can select that, and it shows me the 2 images that are in there I shot with the Canon 90D. And the cool thing about this metadata pane is you can actually change it, and it gives you all of these selections that you can search through the metadata. And all this information in here, you don't have to do anything extra. It's already built into every image that you take. And so again, the concept is find a needle in a haystack. We're just making the haystack a lot smaller. So this is looking at all my dates. I can go through here and say, okay, show me all the pictures I took with just a straight up 500mm lens. Because if you notice, it says 500mm lens, or it'll say the 500mm plus the 1.4 or the 2x, or here's one 800mm with a 1.4 converter. And so I may say, well, let me show me the ones I shot with the 800mm. And then there they are. And it's really that simple. But back to my original point is all that starts with the workflow. I mean, all that every time that I download pictures, I try to make it a point to do that entire workflow in one single step and do all of it. And even if I'm just doing it by trip at a time, I do one trip, then go the next trip, go the next trip. I try to be real systematic and following that workflow all the way through to the end. So that way I can keep up with where I'm at in the process. Color labels help me do that to remind you. I can keep up with where I'm at in the process. And if I've got to quit in the middle of it, I can go back and know where I left off. But the key thing is doing it each and every time and being consistent in that workflow, like I mentioned from the first. So I already told you how I keyworded. Now, we've already been doing this for an hour. Time flies when you're having fun. And sometimes, even though I may not explain it clearly, sometimes I feel like I talk about things in a simplistic manner, like to say, hey, look how easy this is. But this is really pretty easy. It's not, there's none of this is that difficult at all. So if you have any questions, we are to the question and answer portion. If I need to clarify anything, just feel free to look over there on your little Zoom panel, and you can unmute yourself and just ask away.
How do catalogs work into this, Russell?
How do catalogs work into it? Like
Yeah.
you mean the catalogs or the collections?
No, catalogs. At
Well-
the very beginning, everything goes into a catalog.
Yeah, I run counter to what the people that knew Lightroom used to tell you, where they would tell you to do different catalogs for different subjects or whatever, which you could certainly do. I like having all of mine in the one catalog. So if you go back, let me go back and share the screen with you. If you go back and look at Lightroom here, you can see I've just got one catalog right here that all of these pictures live in, and it's a catalog I call magazine pics. And so, well, there's all the photographs in the catalog right there, 657,723 pictures in that entire catalog. And so I just dump them into one catalog. It probably does affect the performance a little bit, but really for me, I don't like sitting there having to think of, well, what catalog are my pictures in, or having multiple catalogs on multiple discs. I like having everything in one place. Like everything lives on this Drobo. I've got 20 terabytes worth of space there. Now, before you say you should have a backup, I do have redundant backups, but for my working copies, everything lives in one spot. It just makes it easier for me to find instead of having to search through a bunch of different catalogs. So that's how I work it. Was that Roger asking the question?
Yep.
Okay,
Thank
yeah, I see now. Okay, hope that helps.
Hey, Russell,
Hey,
this is Roberta. Good
hey,
to see you.
Roberta.
So is there an easy way then, once you're all done, how you get your photos into your filing system, your major categories? How do you do that?
Okay, that's a good question. So can y'all still see my Lightroom? I'm still sharing the Lightroom,
Yep.
right? So I'm not, well, let me go back to this. So really all you have to do here is, let's say I've got an Alaska folder, for example. I just select the pictures I want to move over,
Oh.
and then and this all has to be done in Lightroom, or Lightroom will lose track of it.
You
But
just
let's-
drag them.
Yeah, you just grab them, and then
Okay.
you can see there. It
Yep.
makes a stack, and you just drag them and put them in the folder, and then
Got
it'll copy them over to that folder. Like I said, that has to be done in Lightroom. You can't do it in your filing system outside of Lightroom, or Lightroom will lose track of where your images are.
Yep.
So I just do it in Lightroom and then drag them over to the folders. And then that's where they live. You can do a similar thing, and that's why I asked Roger to clarify. You can do a similar thing in the collections part down here. I've just never really liked using collections that much. It's just a personal preference.
Yep.
And it goes back to what I said earlier. This may not be the absolute best way of doing it, but it's my way of doing it, and it's pretty efficient for me. And so that's why I'm building the folders here and just drag everything into the folders.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey Russell, it's Jane here. Just have a question about your folder system. Let's say that you've got a couple of different species of birds in the one photo,
Uh-huh.
and you're filing them in your birds folder, and then you've got your type of bird folder from that point.
Okay.
How do you make the decision of where to put that photo if it's got two different types?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, Jane, with a question for you. What time is it there?
It is, I think it's just after midday. It's 12:30 tomorrow for you.
Okay, for everyone
mo-
else is listening, Jane lives in Australia. So
Yeah.
welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, what I do is at that point, it's a little bit just of a guess. And so let's say and I know I have some examples in here. I just can't think of one right off the top of my head. Well, let me think of this one. Let me go into my mammals folder, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to use text. Okay, I'm showing all the purple ones. I'm going to use text, and I'm going to type in deer, and I'm going to type in pig. And see what it comes up with here when it thinks about it for a second. No photos match the filter. I was thinking I might have them. Those might not have been my final picks. Usually what I'll do is, if there's two animals in one picture, if they're both in focus and both identifiable, I will keyword both animals in that picture, and then I'll just pick one folder live in. Now you could create like a virtual copy and put one in each folder, but I don't. I just put them in one, and that way when I'm searching for a couple of different species of animals, I can just use my keywords and be able to find them that way. Is how I usually do it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions at all? I'd be happy to answer them. That's how I can tell I wowed everybody with brilliance, because no one has any questions at all. So,
Well, I did have one, if I may.
no, go for it.
Yeah, so Mr. Graves, when you do your shooting, I just have a question about RAW. Do you shoot in RAW or do you shoot in JPEG? Because you haven't mentioned having to deal with converting RAW over to JPEG. So I just wondered if that factors at all into your workflow.
It does. I shoot all raw images. I don't even shoot raw in JPEG. I've always felt like that was a little bit redundant. I just shoot all in raw. And then, so let me go back to Lightroom. Is Lightroom, is it up now?
It's back up.
Okay, so
Yes.
all these are raw images, as you can see by the CR2. That's the Canon's extension there. And so one thing I didn't put is one last step, and I guess I should have put this in my workflow, is one last step. Whenever I do all my keywording, I have them labeled before I move them to their final destination. I'll just do a simple export and then export them to, put them in a folder, on another folder on my desktop. And then it may be just maybe a temporary upload folder. I'm going to upload them to my website, but that's where I go in and I change them on the file settings here. I change them to a JPEG. And then on my website, I don't resize them to fit. They usually go on as full res images on my website, because my website, they'll down sample the images for thumbnail view and all that. So I've just got, all I have to do is upload the full res images, full res JPEG images. So that's the step I did leave out, is when I'm done with all my edits, all my keywording, all my workflow stuff we talked about, I'll just do a final export of JPEGs in the end.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal.
Hey, Russell, I got a question.
Okay.
Photo Mechanic. Do you import into Photo Mechanic and then export to Lightroom? Or how does that work? You importing it twice?
Yeah, essentially I do. So I'll import them in through Photo Mechanic. I don't export them out to Lightroom because I've looked for videos online to see if they play better together. And there's a bunch of more complicated workflows you can do. I found for me just to import them into Photo Mechanic, do my sort, and then once I'm done there, then it's a matter of, you can, like in this first picks folder I was telling you about earlier, this one here, then you can right click on that one, or you can click on that one for example, and then do file, import photos and videos, and then it should bring up the dialog, or you can go through it through here. You can find that folder. You can go through the tree here, and that's all I'm doing there. There's the first picks. And then it'll search for any new images. And then there, I've got all these windows in the way. And then there you can do, you don't move them, you just add them to the catalog. And then once you add them to the catalog, it imports them all into Lightroom for you. There's 2 or 3 different ways you can do that. You can either do it like that, or you can right click it and then hit synchronize folder. And then what Lightroom will do is look at all the changes, that have been made since the last time you did that folder, and then synchronize the new changes with it. So that's just kind of a shortcut of doing what I just did before is by hitting the synchronize folder. So if I hit synchronize folder, it'll bring up all these dialogues. I've got them all checked, and it'll look through that and see it says, okay, there's 5,300 new photos in this folder that we didn't see last time. And so when you hit synchronize again, it'll bring up that dialogue import box like we saw earlier. But the key is there is not move or copy, just add the images to the catalog is all you're doing there. How you
Okay.
doing, Travis?
Doing
Stranger?
well, sir. Yes,
Good.
sir.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Because I got one more thing I want to share with you if we're out of questions. By the way, if you have any other questions, if you think of something later on, I encourage you to stay in touch with me. There's my email address right there. Sometimes I may be a day or two late returning emails, but I always return emails. So if you have any further questions on this or really anything else, just let me know. Also, if you're interested, I've been really trying to build up a brand new website that I started a few months ago. I haven't really talked much about it, but it's called wildlifephotoshow.com. And there, you'll see a bunch of videos I do when I'm out in the field, instructional things or how to. All the webinars I do end up there. So not only this webinar, but there's a bunch of webinars I've done on behalf of Backcountry Journeys that are on there as well. And so there's just a bunch of educational stuff you can take a look at there. And if you're not already signed up for the newsletter, I also send out a monthly newsletter that you can look at, that you'll get subscribed to there as well. And so I don't try to spam you with anything else. I do tell you about upcoming speaking events I've got going on with the newsletter, give you photo tips, show you the latest videos, and then talk about what my workshop schedule looks like if anyone's interested in the workshops I do. So there's all kinds of good stuff on there you can take a look at. And I think that's the last one. If no one else has any other questions, I'll hang around for just a second if someone does and clarify something I may not have clarified. But let me go ahead and thank everybody in advance for showing up tonight. We had a good crowd in here tonight. So these things keep growing and growing month by month. So I'm glad everyone shows up and everyone cares enough to listen to what I have to say and think enough of my opinion to be able to listen to what I have to say. I know photography has always been a labor of love for me. I've been doing it for a long time. And I just told that group last night I was speaking to, it's always been a blessing to be able to press a button on a camera and make something that other people find value in. So for that, I thank everyone who showed up tonight. And I thank you guys for paying attention. Any other questions? Yes, Travis, my beard is real. I know that's your next question. All right. If we don't have any other questions, I'll go ahead and conclude this tonight. Again, thanks to everyone from Texas who showed up. Thanks to everyone in the United States. And I noticed on here that we did have a few international people show up. So thanks to everyone for showing up. And again, if something I said tonight, once you think about it, if it doesn't make sense, let me know and stay tuned. In a day or two, you'll get a replay of all this. But thanks everybody. And I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Take care.